Great. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so I'm going to do my annual thing of telling you what's changed in Numbas in the last year. So I'll do that now and get my slides going. Right. So first of all, oh, now my screen stopped working. There we are. I'll just get you up to date on who's in the team. At the moment, we are 4 people in Newcastle. So from left to right on that picture, we have Chris Graham, who's just introduced me, Laura Midgley, who joined us September or October last year at some point, who's starting to help me with some of the code on Numbas, and Amir Khan, who does a lot of making material, doing particularly the stats modules. We'll have another person joining us in the summer, maybe start of July, and then one more who we're interviewing for this week. So the team's growing, which is really encouraging. Okay, so this is my summary of the last year. Preparing this, I didn't feel like I would have anything to show you, because I feel like we've been just racing to catch up with ourselves all year. So yeah, I mean, the consequences of lockdown and everything have continued. There's so much to do. I don't feel like I got as much development work done as I wanted. But then putting these slides together, I found out I'd done loads. So anyway, busy times. So I always give a quick update on stats as far as we can measure them. So for the public Math Centre Numbers editor, there are now 125,000 questions in the database, which is a big number. Around about 10,000 of those are published. The big number has increased by about 25% this year, which is quite good. So it shows people are really using Numbas heavily. Now we still have around about 8,000 users from around about 1,500 institutions, which are pretty much the same numbers I gave last year. I don't know how those two facts square with each other. Maybe we've lost some. Anyway, I deleted a ton of accounts created by Spellnets. That's what happened. Yeah. So anyway, things are still good. I'll talk a bit about work done by people who are not me, first of all. So last summer, just after EAMS finished, we had 2 student interns, Will McNestry and Alexis Bagdanas, who worked on a few things. They were computer science students. They did some bits around user interface and adding a few functions to JME. Laura joined the team. Laura's been working on a variety of things that you'll see in a second. And as I said, we've got a couple more people joining. So that's quite good. And we've had a handful of very small pull requests from other people who've typically found the good first issue tag on GitHub and fixed little bits that just make things a little bit nicer. So I ended this talk last year with 3 items that I wanted to achieve for the coming year. I showed a prototype of a system for showing you working out, so like step-by-step working for a process. I haven't got back to that yet. I've done lots of other stuff instead, so I haven't made any progress on that. I talked about the lockdown app, the idea that we would have this app that gives students a controlled environment so they can't open the browser's developer tools to look at stuff. That's now done, deployed, been used at Newcastle all year. I think some other places are using it as well. I'll show you how that works in a second. And I said I wanted to get more contributors involved. I don't think I've done hugely well. Laura's certainly contributed plenty, but I'd feel more comfortable with maybe someone in another institution taking on some Numbas development. Right, so as I said, Will and Alexis added a couple of JME functions. I gave them some fairly straightforward jobs to do. There's some functions now to combine matrices for, I think some of our coding theory modules had things where like you make an augmented matrix. So if you've got a square matrix and you add it onto a rectangular matrix with the right number of rows, there's a function to do that now. Fixed some bits in the exam interface, and they've added in within the code an events framework that extensions and Steam code can hook into. So like when a certain thing happens in an exam, you can make something else happen. So that will be useful going forward. I've already used that a little bit. The lockdown app is now available. In fact, there are two options. If you use the Numbas LTI provider, you can ask for the Numbas lockdown app or Safe Exam Browser, which is a well-established open source app. So the way it works is a student clicks a link to open a Numbas test and they get shown this screen that you see there saying it needs the app. It's a button to launch it or to install it if they don't have it yet. For the Numbas app, it doesn't really lock down the whole computer. The idea is just to restrict access to the internals of the exam. The student has to type in a password that you give them. That decrypts the settings to launch the exam. So that should be the only way they can get into the exam. Safe Exam Browser will completely lock down your computer and just show the Numbas exam page. And we've been using that for our high stakes exams this year, and it's gone pretty smoothly. Chris is nodding, so I'm not actually involved with that. I haven't heard any complaints. Yeah, so that's good. I'm pleased that's in. Another thing I do, another gratuitous GIF here, because when we make changes to the way Numbas works, it's really hard to be sure that you won't accidentally break anything. I've been working really hard on adding lots and lots of unit tests for different features. And those can now run headlessly, which means they can run without a browser. So every time we commit some new code to the repository, these tests get run automatically by GitHub, and it tells us if any of them break, which is good. And that's happened a couple of times. So that should mean that we don't accidentally break stuff as often as we used to. So yeah, more stability, very good. I'm getting all the admin-y stuff out of the way first. Also this year, in fact, Will and Alexis helped me with this. We dropped support for Internet Explorer, which meant we had been stuck on a very old version of JavaScript syntax and all sorts of features we couldn't use. Microsoft dropped support for Internet Explorer a while ago now, but we'd hung on because it still shows up in the usage stats. We made the decision to drop it and instead to stick with trying to support at least 95% of all browsers as measured by, there's a couple of sites that measure these things. One is caniuse.com, and Mozilla also do some stats on this. So in order to work out what we could do, I made a tool where we select all of the browser features we're using, and it uses the current usage stats to say what percentage of browsers will support that. So this screenshot here says the features that we use at the moment are supported by 96.43% of browsers. I think that's quite a useful tool. I was surprised it didn't already exist. I couldn't find something that would do a combination of features. The site caniuse.com will tell you a single feature, how many browsers use it, but really you're interested in the set intersection of everything you use. So that's what that does. And we document these choices in the repository. So that's reproducible. Right. Now into the more interesting stuff. This again is about something that other projects can use. The topic of Unicode characters has come up on and off over the years. The this is to do with the way that the computer represents text. When you have a string of text that the student types or that you show to the student, the characters are chosen from a character set. Unicode is every symbol that the computer knows about. And there are thousands and thousands of symbols from different scripts around the world. There's thousands of math symbols. So I decided to once and for all try to cover everything that we could, or at least look through all the maths ones and map them onto stuff in JME so we can use symbols. I think maybe this was also last summer, someone in a German university asked for why can't I have a umlaut as a letter in a variable name? That's completely reasonable. So I made sure that variable names support any letter character. There's a whole load of stuff. Things like parentheses. Students from places like China and Japan, typically their keyboards will produce the full width versions of brackets, which are not the same thing as the brackets that I get when I type on my keyboard. So I found out what all of those are and mapped those. I've made this a project on GitHub and tried to do it in a way that it can be copied to other into other projects as well. I think the Stack team have been using this as well. If I move to this, how do I move to another tab? There we go. So I have a nice big Jupyter notebook of looking through each of the categories in Unicode. I'll scroll down until I've got one of these big tables looking. I mean, there's an Armenian hyphen character, who knew? There's 100 different kinds of things. So that was a fun couple of days looking through those. Hopefully that is done now and everyone can use that and work off it. There are still bits that haven't quite been mapped on properly, stuff typically that Numbas doesn't support. So there's a little bit more to be done there. Right, onwards. We looked at the printed worksheet theme this year. So this is the theme for Numbas that produces something you can print out. You can give individualized worksheets to students to work out on paper. I think Peter Rowlett is going to be talking about how he uses this. That was the impetus for making it 10 years ago-ish. We finally published a paper together about how all that goes. That was part of Peter's PhD thesis. Anyway, so we've tidied up the interface for doing this and added some extra features around page margins and page breaks and stuff. I think we also use this for backup papers in our summative exams. So that was the motivation to do that. Last autumn, I looked at the layout of the editor. I moved some things around, just trying to make it a bit easier. We used to have a load of tabs down the left-hand side of the page, which meant there was very little horizontal space for the main editor. So the tab selectors have moved to the top. Some other stuff around the extension and theme editors, those now work a bit better. Just generally, it's had a bit of a zhuzh. And as part of that, Numbas in the editor has supported having unit tests in questions for a long time, but nobody really uses them because they were hidden away and it wasn't completely clear how to use them. I've added a tool at the question level. There's a tab for unit tests where it will show you all the unit tests for all the parts in the question, and you can run them all at once as a quick way of checking that your question still works. So if you come back to something the next year, you can check that I haven't broken anything. So hopefully that means we'll start using unit tests more. And also on the server side, I've now got some tools to run these tests across all of our questions, which I've used a couple of times with when we've had big updates. I think one of the first things that Laura worked on was I gave them the job of taking our old command line script for setting up the editor to turn it into a web-based thing. I realized supervising Will and Alexis and then Laura that setting up the development environment was quite finicky. I use a Linux machine where it's fairly straightforward, but they used Windows and it was really difficult. So we've written some much clearer instructions about how to set up a development environment. And then this web-based setup tool makes it a bit easier to see what you need to do and how to configure it. So hopefully that will allow more people to get involved with contributing code. I've had a few avenues of developing extensions to Numbas on the go this year. Spreadsheets is the one that I managed to finish just last week. The motivation for this was we have a colleague in engineering who runs our surveying module. And surveyors have to go out into the field, literally the field, and take a load of measurements to maybe level some ground. So they fill out a huge table and the different rows have to agree with each other. Arithmetically, it's really simple. I couldn't believe that there was anything to get wrong when I saw it. But the hard part is just knowing which numbers go where. So he had been writing questions which used gap fills. He had a table and they would have 100 gaps in it. And it was really, really hard to see how that question worked. And it was really pushing the system to limit that. It's not how it's meant to use it. It wasn't very pleasant. So I thought what would be really nice would be if you could make a spreadsheet in Excel, upload that to the editor and sort of show it to the student and ask them to fill it in. So that's what this extension does. So yeah, you can make a spreadsheet in Excel and upload it into the editor. It becomes a question variable. You can then fill it in with randomized values, apply some styling, and then show that to the student as a part. They can then edit some bits. You can disable some bits of the spreadsheet and then mark it. The built-in marking algorithm will just compare what the student wrote with a correct answer that you give. But you can use a custom marking algorithm to do whatever you like. I think for the surveyors, the marking algorithm could maybe look at consistency, so check that the rows agree with each other. So I think that's going to be really useful for the engineers. I think scientists of all sorts fill in these kinds of tables a lot. I've made a demo exam with a lot of examples of different ways I think you could use it. Yeah, I think this will be really useful. I'm going to say for the simpler stuff, not in a derogatory way, but in the stuff that's not the really complicated maths, but where the layout is really important. I think maybe schools could use this as well. Okay. The other thing Laura has been working on is being able to take record scores for students who aren't using Numbas through a learning environment. So the motivation is when we've had contact from secondary school teachers who don't have access to VLEs like Blackboard or Canvas that will handle running a SCORM package or using LTI or whatever. Really, they can just use what's on the web. If they have Google Classroom, that doesn't really allow anything outside Google products. So for a long time, we've wanted a way of allowing a student to maybe download something that contains their attempt data and send it back to the teacher in a way that the teacher can use. And again, the teacher won't want to be running lots of scripts. So we tried to make this as straightforward as possible. So what we've come up with is there's a button to tick in the exam editor to allow the student to download their data. You give a key, which is going to be used to encrypt their data. So just a secret string, effectively, that you make up. Student gets a text file containing their encrypted data, and they send it to the teacher. And then there's this analysis tool, which is linked from the editor, or it's also included in the exam package that you download, which I'm really keen not to tie stuff into the editor always existing. So even if you've got the old exam package, you can still analyze this data. So you upload the student's files into this thing, and it will show you a summary. It can show you just total scores, or break it down by questions, or you can break it down even further to see individual parts and the answers the student gave. So I think hopefully that will be useful for allowing numbers use by teachers, by people in contexts where you maybe you don't have access to a VLE, or you have students that you can't create accounts for yet. I think we have this problem with transition, or with students coming in before they've come to the university and before they've registered with RIT. This might be helpful. Yeah, so hopefully that works out. Right, I'm nearly at the end. So every year I give this breakdown of the issues in the issue tracker as my ever ballooning to-do list. I'm really pleased this year that the total is less than it was last year. I think maybe one of the reasons I don't feel I've done a lot this year is I've spent a lot of time going through the issue trackers, working on stuff that had been there a while, and wasn't a big feature, but was a little thing that could be made a bit better, or a small bug. So I've tackled a lot of stuff in the main exam repository. The editor is still very slightly positive in a number of issues, and so is the LTI provider. But yeah, the to-do list is, we'll call it manageable at the moment. In fact, the number here is 98. It's now 99 after talking to Laura at lunchtime today. So it's growing again. Right. I'll finish by talking about my aims for next year. LTI is doing that thing where there's a new version and all the VLE providers say they won't support the old version. So we need to rewrite the LTI provider to support the new version. I'm going to do that. I've written a new LTI provider for Chiron, the other thing that I'm at the moment responsible for. So I started that from scratch, and I now understand how LTI 1.3 works, so I can go over and do that to the Numbas one. Hopefully in the next year. A year is long enough, I think, if nothing else comes up, for me to have a look at this. I don't have any other specific aims for the next year. I'd love there to be more contributors to Numbas. And if the strike days don't go ahead, my session next Monday will be about how you can get involved helping with Numbas. So hopefully I'm around for that. Yeah, so that's it. And I think I'll stop there. If there are any questions, put them in the Matrix chat, and I can answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. So as Christian says, if you can pop any questions that you have in the thread on the Matrix chat, maybe while waiting for a question there, Christian, one for you that might be of interest to others, I suppose. Are there any major advantages that will come about by moving to LTI 1.3? I guess I'm of interest to other developers.
Yes, I think there's this deep linking protocol. So we could have for an instructor, you go from your VLE, you make up a Numbas link, and you're shown a screen to pick which exam you want to use, and so that could maybe pick from the editor directly, instead of at the moment where you make a link and then once it first loads as an instructor, you have to upload a zip package. So that's a bit awkward. And I think the other thing it will do is let us get the list of students on the course without them having to log in first. So for things like setting up access changes for an exam where students need extra time, we can just show a list and you pick which ones you want instead of having to remember usernames. So a few things. but largely I wish that they hadn't deprecated the old version, because it still works fine.
So is the way. We've got a question being typed by the looks of it. Oh, here we go. Okay, so Andrew Parker asks, you mentioned automatic unit tests for problems. Does this mean that they run automatically or are generated automatically?
It's a bit of both. The generation is nothing complicated. There's automatically, you get one test that checks that the expected answer that you give is marked correct, which surprisingly occasionally happens, that someone will give an expected answer that is in fact wrong. But otherwise, you make up your own unit tests for other kinds of answers, for incorrect answers, and then those can be run automatically.
Thank you, Christian.